Hey guys, and welcome to another tech story. Today I will be explaining what is a variable. I will also talk about the different data types in Python. So let's get started. So what is a variable? A variable simply is a container for your data. Your data can be, for example, a number, a string or text, a collection of different types of data. A variable is stored in the RAM, which is a temporary storage, which means that when you close the program or when you shut down your device, all stored variables will be completely lost. Now we're going to talk briefly and take an overview look on the different types of data in Python 3. The first type is none, or as it's called in other programming languages, null. And this is simply an empty value, meaning a variable without any value assigned to it. Secondly, we have a string, and a string is simply text. The third type is numeric, which is basically a number. There's multiple types of numeric values. The first type is integer, and that is a whole number, i.e. 1, 100, 4000. Then we have float, and float is a decimal number, i.e. 1.1, 100.5. Then we have complex, and as the name suggests, it is a complex concept. A complex number is a combination of two parts. The first part is a real number. The second part is an imaginary number followed by the letter J. And the letter J is the same as the letter I in mathematics, which is the square root of -1. And finally, we have a Boolean value, which is simply either a 0 or a 1. A 1 for true and a 0 is false. The next type of data is lists, or as it's called in other programming languages, an array. A list is a collection of data. It can be the same type of data, or it can be entirely different types of data stored in the same list. Much like the list, tuples and sets are the same. They are also a collection of data. Now moving on to range. Range is a function that takes a number and returns all numbers between that number and 0. So for example, if you want the range of 3, you will get back the numbers 0, 1, and 2. And finally is dictionary, and we save the best for last. A dictionary is a collection of value, but with this you can have a key and a value pair. So for example, if you have all your customers that you want to store in a variable, but you want it more organized, i.e. you want a key for name and another key for age and another key for phone number, and then the value for each individual key. So you would have the name, and then the value would be the actual name. You would have the age, and the value would be the actual age. So before I show you the actual syntax of each data type in Python, I want to take a moment and elaborate a little on lists, tuples, and sets. As I mentioned before, a variable is a type of container, and those types are no different. So in this scene, the list is represented by a ship that can contain different types of shipments, or values in this case. So here we can see the different types of values. We have the value 10, which is an integer. We have the value h and hello world, which are strings. Finally, we have the value 22.5, which is a float. And all these different types of values can be put within our list. Each of them would have an index or a numbered place. And indexes starts with 0 and count up. So as we can see in the scene, the value 10 in the first place and thus has the index of 0. The value hello world is in the second place, so it has the index of 1. And since we have 4 values, so we can see our index count is up to 3. And a list, tuple, or set is as any other variable, as I mentioned, meaning as soon as we close or restart our device, all data will be lost. So let's take a look at the syntax and how to actually create a variable in Python. But unlike many other programming languages where you have to type a keyword such as var or int or double, for example, before you type the variable name to identify that this should be treated as a variable, in Python, however, you can just write the variable name and assign a value to it directly. Here I have PowerShell open on my Windows 10 machine, and I will demonstrate how to create a variable. So to create a variable, I will first write the variable name, which in this case I will name empty, followed by the sign equal, and finally the value that I will assign to it, which in this case will be none, and thus this value is of type none. So I need to type Python first in my PowerShell. And now I'm gonna type the variable empty equal to none. So let's double check the type of this value. And to do this, you use the function type, open parentheses, and I'm gonna write empty. And here, as we can see, the type of this is none. So let's now create a string. I'm gonna use the same variable empty, and I'm gonna make it equal to the famous sentence for all programming languages, which is hello world. Hit enter. Now let's see the type of empty now. The type now is str, which is short for string. So let's create a numeric value. I'm gonna use the same variable, which is empty. I'm gonna assign the value of 10. So the value of 10, because it's a whole number, it's an integer. So let's check the type of empty now. And here we can see it's an int, which is short for integer. If I changed empty to 10.5, hit enter, and use the type function again, now it's a float. Now let's try a complex. So empty equal to, the first part, as you remember, is a real number, which is 6. The second part is an imaginary number. I'm gonna choose 8, followed by the letter j, which is the same as square root of -1. Now to touch on this very quickly, because 8 is multiplied by j, which is an imaginary number, therefore it is also an imaginary number. Complex number is a very interesting subject, and you can read more about it online. I'll leave a link in the description. And now let's check the type of empty. And as we can see, now this variable is of type complex. Now let's create a boolean, and I'm gonna name this one check. And I'm gonna make it equal to true, which is equal to 1. And let's check the variable check, and it has the value true in it. And this is very beneficial when you're using an if statement to check for something. Now let's check the type of the variable check. A lot of check in this sentence. And it is of the type bool, which is short for boolean. Now let's create a list. I'm gonna call this list my list. Very original. And I'm gonna set this equal to empty brackets, which is the sign to create a list. In order to let Python know that this is a list, you have to put the values within brackets and hit enter. And now let's run the type function over my list. And we can see this is a type of list. Now let's add values in this. In order to add values, you add the values and you separate them by a comma. So I'm going to add 1, 2, 3, 2.5, and hello world. And I'm going to hit enter. So here, how many values do we have here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And as I mentioned, when you create a list, each item has an index number or a place number. We start with 0 and we count up. So 1 is index 0, 2 is index 1, 3 is index 2, and so on and so forth. So to call a specific index of them, so I opened my list now. So now I want the value hello world from my list. One way to do it is to type the variable name, and then between brackets I would type the index number, which in this case here is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we type 4, we hit enter, and there we go, hello world. Of course, this is in the console, so you can just write the name of the variable and it will show you the value. But if you want to do it right, then you would use the print function to print the value to the console. So we're gonna write my list, and between brackets we're gonna call the index 0 this time, which is the number 1, and hit enter, and there we go, here is the number 1. Now let's create a tuple, and I'm gonna call this one p, and I'm gonna set it equal to 1, 2, and the letter r, and the word yes, and hit enter. Now let's check the type of this variable using the function type, and as we see, it's of type tuple. Now you can retrieve values from tuples using the same method as list, i.e. we'll write p, the name of the variable, followed by brackets, square brackets, and the value or the index of the value. So in this case, I want yes, so that's 3, and there we go. Now let's create a set, and this one I'm gonna call setting, just for a lack of imagination. And for a set, you need to use curly brackets. So I'm gonna assign the values 20, 2.5, and the letter Q. Now let's check the type of the variable setting using the type function. And as we can see, it's a set. Now a set is not ordered, so you cannot retrieve it the same way. If you, for example, use the same way, setting a bracket, and I'm gonna use 1, for example, hit enter, I will get an error because there's no index. One way to check if there's a specific value in a set but not actually retrieve it is that I can write print, and I want the number 20 in the variable setting. Now this will return true because it has the number 20, but it will not actually retrieve the value. And if it doesn't have, it will just return false. One way to retrieve values here is that you can use a for loop, which we're going to cover later, but I will show just for demonstration's sake. So we're going to do a for loop with an e in setting. So what this does basically, it just loops within the set, rotating all its values and putting it one by one in this temporary variable e. So, and here I'm gonna print the variable e and hit enter, and there we go. Here are all the values that is in the set setting. Now let's see how to create a range. And here I'm gonna create a variable called y, for example, and this will be equal to range, and we will call the range function, and we will pass the number 3. Hit enter, and let's see the type of y, and y is of type range. So if we actually see y, we will see it has from 0 to 3. And finally, let's create a dictionary. I'm gonna call this user. Now let's open curly brackets, and we're gonna have the key name with the value John, and we're gonna have the key age with the value 22, and the key last name with the value Leo, for example. And let's see the type of the variable user using the type function. And we can see the type is dictionary. We can retrieve a value by simply typing user between brackets, enter the key, which is name, hit enter, and here we have John. Now this is one way to get the values. We can also write user, and we're gonna get the whole thing. So this was it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe and share, and I'll see you in the next video.